What are the odds of surviving not just one, but two devastating nuclear explosions? Most would say impossible. But on August 6th and 9th, 1945, one man defied those impossible odds twice. His name was Tsutomu Yamaguchi, and his story is one of the most remarkable tales of human resilience ever recorded. Today, we're diving into the incredible and tragic life of the man who experienced atomic warfare twice and lived to tell the tale. Let's go. It's August 1945. World War II is coming to a close, and Japan's fate hangs in the balance. The United States has developed a new weapon, one that will change warfare forever. On August 6th, the B-29 bomber Enola Gay, named after the pilot's mother, approaches the city of Hiroshima. Its payload, a bomb called Little Boy. Despite its innocent name, this device holds catastrophic power. But here's where our story begins. On that exact day, a 29-year-old man named Tsutomu Yamaguchi was in Hiroshima, finishing up a months-long business trip. He worked as a designer for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, crafting oil tankers. He was supposed to catch a train home to Nagasaki that day. He was supposed to see his wife, Hisako, but a forgotten stamp would change everything. Tsutomu had left his hanko, his identification stamp, at the office. It seems like such a small thing, right? Running back to get it. But that small decision put him in the path of history. As he raced toward the Mitsubishi shipyard, he heard a loud noise from above. An American B-29 bomber. He looked up and watched as a small object descended on a parachute. What happened next is almost unimaginable. A blinding white flash, brighter than anything Tsutomu had ever seen, filled the entire sky. He compared it to a magnesium flare, but multiplied 1,000-fold. In that split second, he knew what was coming. He dove into a nearby ditch. A deafening boom. His body was lifted into the air, spun around violently, and slammed to the ground. He was less than 2 miles from ground zero, the epicenter of the blast. The odds of surviving at that distance? Virtually zero. But Tsutomu did something remarkable. He survived. When Tsutomu regained consciousness, he woke in a potato patch. His eardrums had burst from the blast. There was no sound, just darkness, the summer sun replaced by ash, dust, and debris. His body was covered in severe burns, particularly on his face and arms. He did what survivors do. He checked if his legs still worked. Miraculously, despite the pain, they did. In a daze, Tsutomu made his way back to the Mitsubishi shipyard. The world around him was unrecognizable. Buildings were reduced to rubble. Fires raged everywhere. And above it all, a massive mushroom cloud, like a stationary tornado, engulfed in flames. When he reached the shipyard, he expected to find no one alive. But his 2 colleagues, the very people he was supposed to travel with, had also survived. The 3 men found an air raid shelter and spent the night there, trying to process the impossible. By August 7th, they decided they had to leave Hiroshima. They had to get out. When they emerged from the shelter, they stepped into a nightmare. The streets were lined with charred bodies. The faces of people who'd suffered agonizing deaths stared back at them. Fires consumed what remained of the city. To reach the train station, they had to cross a bridge. But the bridge had been burned beyond use. So they did the unthinkable. They waded through the river beneath it, a river filled with floating corpses. Desperate to escape, they trudged through this horror and made it to the station. There, they boarded a night train to Nagasaki. Tsutomu was reunited with his wife and family. He was briefly hospitalized, but chose to go home. His mother didn't even recognize him. His burns were that severe. But here's where you see Tsutomu's character. He insisted on going back to work the very next day. 1 day of rest. That's all he allowed himself after surviving a nuclear bomb. On August 9th, Tsutomu walked into the Mitsubishi office in Nagasaki, his hometown. He was covered in bandages and bloody dressings. His boss demanded a full report on the Hiroshima bombing. But instead of sympathy or praise for his work ethic, something shocking happened. His boss reprimanded him. He accused Tsutomu of being careless for losing his colleagues in the blast. And then, he questioned whether Tsutomu's story was even true. He insisted that one bomb couldn't possibly wreak such havoc on an entire city. Tsutomu was trying to explain himself when he saw something outside the window. A familiar sight, a big flash of light, just like the one he'd witnessed 3 days earlier. His blood must have run cold. He knew exactly what was coming. In the seconds before impact, Tsutomu thought he'd brought the Hiroshima mushroom cloud home with him. The sky turned white. Then came the explosion. He and his boss were violently thrown through the office. Glass rained down. Debris hurtled through the air. When the dust settled, they were both still alive. Now, here's a striking detail from the historical record. Tsutomu's boss, the man who just called him a liar moments before, had to confront an undeniable truth. There was no way to deny it anymore. Tsutomu had been telling the truth about the devastating power of a nuclear blast. Tsutomu picked himself up. His old bandages had burned off. New wounds had formed. He looked around the burning building and made a choice. He jumped out the window. When his boss called for help, Tsutomu didn't answer. He was angry, betrayed. So instead, he left him there and headed home. When Tsutomu arrived at his house, he saw something that filled him with dread. Part of his home had been reduced to a skeleton. His heart must have stopped. But then, a miracle. His wife Hisako emerged, injured but alive. In the span of just 3 days, Tsutomu had been within 2 miles of each atomic bomb attack. He'd survived both, but the real battle was just beginning. Days after the Nagasaki blast, Tsutomu's body began to show the devastating effects of radiation exposure. He vomited uncontrollably. His hair fell out. Gangrene developed on his arms. He couldn't get the medical treatment he desperately needed. He and his family were hiding in a bomb shelter. By August 15th, his health was collapsing. He developed a fever. He couldn't keep down food or water. He genuinely believed death was near. But then, something happened that gave him, and the entire nation, a glimmer of hope. Japan surrendered. The war was over. Relief washed over the injured and the sick, though Tsutomu was too ill to feel much of anything at that moment. Over the coming weeks, Tsutomu slowly regained his strength. Remarkably, he didn't just survive, he went on to build a full life. He had 3 children with Hisako. He became a translator for the U.S. Armed Forces, then returned to his job at Mitsubishi. When the Nagasaki government announced they would provide health benefits to bombing survivors, Tsutomu applied for Hibakusha status. Hibakusha means bomb-affected people, a designation reserved for those exposed to radiation. But here's the tragedy. His official ID could only prove he was exposed in Nagasaki. His true status as a double survivor, a survivor of both bombs, was officially ignored. Tsutomu chose not to draw attention to this. He didn't want a spotlight. For decades, he and his family lived quietly. He didn't discuss his trauma publicly. Instead, he processed his horrors through poetry. Later research would discover that around 150 people were in both cities when the blast occurred. But Tsutomu was one of the first to go public with his story. But survival came at a cost. A terrible cost. Tsutomu and Hisako's children all suffered irreversible effects from the radiation their parents were exposed to. Their son Katsutoshi died in 2005 at age 59. His daughters Tashiko and Naoko were plagued with health issues throughout their lives. Tsutomu himself developed permanent hearing loss in his left ear. For over a decade, he still wore bandages over his old wounds. He developed radiation-related leukemia. In the mid-2000s, decades after the bombs fell, Tsutomu felt it was finally time to speak out. He released a memoir called A Life Well Lived and became vocal about his stance on atomic weapons, speaking about how they strip away human dignity and leave lasting scars on survivors and their families. In 2009, Tsutomu decided he wanted official recognition as a double survivor. The government granted his request. He was finally recognized for what he was, a survivor of both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki atomic bombings. Mere months after receiving that recognition, in 2010, Tsutomu succumbed to stomach cancer, almost certainly caused by his radiation exposure. He was 93 years old. Despite the odds stacked against him, despite surviving 2 nuclear blasts, radiation sickness, cancer, hearing loss, and a lifetime of trauma, Tsutomu Yamaguchi lived almost a decade past the average lifespan of a Japanese male of his generation. He not only survived the unsurvivable, he lived a full life. He raised a family. He became a voice for peace. He was, in every sense of the word, resilient. Tsutomu Yamaguchi's story reminds us of the incredible strength of the human spirit and the devastating cost of war. If you found Tsutomu's story as compelling as we did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible historical stories. And let us know in the comments what aspect of his story moved you most. Thanks for watching.